Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time zone you're joining us from, and welcome to this cross-platform deep dive with TMS Software. We're going to be talking about their FNC or Framework Neutral Component Suite, which is a pretty, I think, neat technology stack that allows you to use the same components across a wide variety of frameworks. So the way this is going to work is Holger is going to kind of walk through some slides, kind of some overview about the FNC components, and all of you, this is going to be very short slides, demos type thing, but then we want you to put questions in the question panel and go to webinar. So over on the side there is a box where you can type your questions in, and then once Holger gets through the short presentation portion, we're going to go right into your questions, and this is going to really be driven by your questions. And the goal is not that we're going to have all the answers off the top of our head, but that this will be an opportunity for us to say, oh, that's an interesting question. I never thought of that before. Let's figure it out. And we can figure it out together. So with that, Holger, are you going to introduce everybody in your slides, or should we introduce everybody now?
I would like to introduce everybody right now because I didn't add that to the slides. So I'm going to be like a donkey, starting with myself. You know, as we say in Europe, the donkey always introduces itself first. So I'm Holger Flick, and I've been working with TMS Software as an evangelist since 2017 now, a couple of years. Time flies. And I've started back in the day the tutorial videos and presentations of their products, and that's how the cooperation started. And in the meantime, we've even created a couple of Delphi books, and yeah, that's why I'm here today. With us today is also Bruno Ferrin, CEO of TMS Software. Bruno, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. Thanks to, well, Peter can introduce himself, but we are sitting here thanks to Peter, who is the architect of the FNC components, the framework neutral components. But we'll go in more detail about that in these 2 hours session that we have. So we have plenty of time to go really in depth. Yeah. So I give the word to Peter.
Okay, thanks, Bruno. Welcome, everybody. So I'm Peter, and I started with TMS, working with TMS as an early employee in 2007. So it's been quite some years. And now we are presenting FNC, which is actually our major product, and technically, how do you say it in English? The top that we have reached in all the years of development. So yeah, I'm looking forward to your questions, and let's bring it on.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
That's
all right,
great.
great.
Let's bring it on is the right way to introduce FNC, because there's nothing you can't do with it, to be honest with you. When I got introduced to it a couple of years ago, and it's along since when is it along, Peter? 2017, I think you started working, right?
Yeah.
So
2017, the first one, the first version.
And as it always is with TMS, they set the mark high, you know, because they said, like, we want to support all the platforms with one set of components. We want to support all the platforms that are inside of Delphi. So basically, if you use the FNC controls, and this is what I'm going to start with, what makes the FNC suite so special compared to other component sets out there, and where are the differences? And then we'll go from there, because there's not only one set of FNC components, there are several sets of FNC components, so that you can, kind of like a toolbox, you can pick what you need for your development needs. So here at the center, we have FNC, which stands for Framework Neutral Components. And I always say FNC is universal, because you can use these components, and this might seem strange at first, on a VCL form. You can use them on a FireMonkey form. and you can also use them on a TMS WEB Core form, or you can also use them with Lazarus in the Lazarus component library. That's what LCL stands for. So if you have an FNC component, and that I couldn't believe it at first, but you can actually, if you have the, and I'll show it soon, the controls on your tool palette in Delphi, you can drop the very same component in all the different frameworks, which means you have the same properties, the same events, and the same methods in all of the frameworks, which makes development much more efficient because you only have to learn each control once. Not like, because there's subtle differences between all the different frameworks, as we know, like the VCL has different properties for font than FireMonkey, and FNC unites everything, so you have one set of settings to set these things. And because you can use it with all these frameworks that are just introduced, you can target all the platforms with one set of components. So you can not only, for example, with a VCL component, you can only address Windows applications, but with using the FNC component, you can also use the same component in FireMonkey, which opens up the mobile world with iOS and Android, also macOS for desktop clients. And of course, I think it's even bundled in the professional or enterprise edition. I'm sure Jim knows that, Linux with these controls. And of course, if you go to the web and create a web application with FNC controls, you have all the browsers available, because TMS WEB Core is web browser agnostic. It works in all the HTML5 web browsers.
Yeah, so FMX Linux is part of the enterprise and architect offering.
Okay, thank you. Because I always say I'm not in sales. You have to talk to the sales guys, which edition includes what for what price. So, and this is where you can really go into all the different packages that are available for FNC. And the most visual one is the FNC UI Pack, because it includes visual controls that you see. Like, we have included grids, a rich text editor, we have more complex controls that really save a lot of time, because you have a whole Kanban functionality, or as you see here on the right, a planner control, which gives you, I always call it an Outlook-like calendar control, because immediately you associate, if you think of Outlook, this is the view you're thinking of. And in the latest version, you can also assign different resources, meaning you cannot only display a calendar for one person for several days, but you can also assign resources. Here, the people are resources, and display their to-do or their involvement with a certain project really easily. And the whole rendering, and this is what you tend to forget if you work with FNC, this rendering and everything works not only for Windows Desktop, but it will look the same on a FireMonkey application that you obviously with different screen sizes, but you will be able to deploy this then to different platforms easily without rewriting the whole application. In addition to those, there's also toolbars, ribbon bars, menu controls, different edit controls, and yeah.
I have a quick question that's related to where we're at right now. Does FNC and FireMonkey, if you're building a mobile application or a FireMonkey application, does FNC give you the ability to use all FNC components, or are you going to be using FNC components and some FireMonkey components? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The controls are always going to be the same, and if my two co-hosts agree, I can simply show dropping a component on a form, VCL form, and then dropping the same component on a FireMonkey form, because I think
the question is does FNC cover all the basic FireMonkey components, or are you going to need to use both FireMonkey components and FNC components to build a application?
I think Peter can explain the motivation behind it, but as I see it, you can still use the standard FireMonkey controls if you want to. It's not exclusive, but it's if you really want to build user interfaces that you can carry from one platform to another, you should focus on using the FNC controls.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can expand on that. So first of all, technically, you can of course mix FNC controls in an application with FMX controls. If it's an FMX application, and you can mix VCL controls, standard VCL or other third-party VCL controls with FNC controls, or even other TMS VCL controls in a VCL Windows application. Of course, it is important if you aim to create an application that will compile against different frameworks. What is technically perfectly possible is that you create an application with FNC components and compile that application for the Windows VCL target, but you can compile that same application if you have used FNC, for example, in a WEB Core web client application. We try to cover all possible needs in these type of applications, so that actually there is no immediate need for, let's say, a standard VCL T-edit or a T-button or an FMX T-edit, T-button, and these kind of things. That does not mean, however, that there is for every single VCL standard component or every different specific FMX standard control an equivalent in FNC, but you can still mix. And we think at this moment we have covered pretty much everything, and that's really the meaning. It's pretty much there are things that are still on the radar that we know, to make it also, offer it also in FNC, so that you really reach that goal of creating an application that is not strictly tied to a framework anymore. So your ability to switch from one framework to another framework becomes really light.
Okay, that perfect. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, so because we wanted to make this a little bit more dynamic and not just a presentation of slides, when the three of us got together and talked about it, we thought we would not just show the slides all after another, but we would then intervene with demonstrations or even given details in Delphi. That's why I open up Delphi, and I hope you only see one screen, not two screens, because on the right screen I have all my, like, for later on if you wanted to look at other packages like secret keys from Google. So hopefully they're not visible. They're on the second screen, hidden away.
No,
so,
we're just seeing your main screen. We're fine. You're fine.
Okay, that's good. So, so I want to take people's fear away for even using FNC, because some people say like, oh, it's not VCL. That's the conclusion they make, but it is VCL or it is FireMonkey. It is. So you create a normal VCL, and let's call it normal VCL application. It's nothing special, so to speak. And then in addition to all the standard VCL controls that you have, you're also going to get the TMS FNC UI controls, if I can find them, because I have so much from TMS installed. So here you see other FNC packages that we're going to cover later, the FNC cloud components, for example, and you see that it mixes with the existing components or controls that you have installed. And here is the FNC UI Pack, and you see that in addition to the that you have like special controls for to collect bitmaps, and also an edit control, edit button control. So things that you're used to from VCL component packs from third-party vendors. But let's see, for example, here we have the planner that I just showed on the slide, and this is how easy it is. You drop it on the form, and then in your object inspector you have, and please bear with me if I say normal control, this is nothing else that distinguishes it from any other VCL control. You have the class name, and you can set its properties, and you can set its events. And the thing that makes FNC so special is that right now you can create your Windows application, but you can also, and this is what makes it special, you can say File, New. Now we create a multi-device application, which means it's a FireMonkey application. And then the tool palette doesn't even jump like it usually does when you switch between VCL and FireMonkey. You see, you again have the TMS FNC UI controls. And again, we also have the planner control. And it looks just the same, just rendered in the FNC, in the FireMonkey designer. And again, you have the same properties and events as before and the same class name. So your source code can stay the same. So if you build your user interface and have a separate, which TMS has many examples for, build your business logic in separate classes, you can actually build an application in the VCL, in FireMonkey, and for the web using the same business logic. So I don't see if there are any questions so far. There we go, questions.
Sorry, I was muted. What? I have one more question, and then there's another question here. Can you make a FNC application that you can then cross-compile to web, FireMonkey, VCL, or is it does the form have to be of a specific type before you add FNC components to it?
The FNC components are added to a form for the framework that you want to use. For example, if you use a FireMonkey application, you have FireMonkey forms, and that application, if you compile it, is tied to the platforms that are supported. But I can show this pretty easily if you go to the demos that are included with the FNC UI Pack. You immediately get, for example, VCL, FireMonkey, and demos like that. And let's go to the, and then you have the demo for the VCL platform, but there's also demonstrations that share code, meaning it is being shown for multiple frameworks. Peter, do you know one demo that is built that way, where you can see like, hey, here's the that spans multiple frameworks? I know we had the TV guide thingy way back, and
yeah, let me take a look.
So you can build shared code units that are suitable for all the frameworks and the user interface, because each framework like FireMonkey or VCL has certain visual classes. For the VCL, it's T-form. FireMonkey, I think it's called T-form as well, but it's a completely different class, of course. So you need always to have a unit with the, because FireMonkey obviously uses FMX files and the VCL uses DFM files. So you have to separate your user interface code from the business logic code.
You can take a look at the PDF lib, the BME demo. So, well, it's a demo that completely built up in code, but of course you can mix and match. You can design your forms and also create some user interface controls at runtime. So that's a demo that is completely built up in one unit. It's the other one, Holger, the PDF, PME.
Oh, my favorite application, talking about body mass index.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think you should be able to see that the unit is not directly in the same folder as the project, but it's in a shared folder. So when you open the VCL demo, you will see the same structure, but of course with the different uses list, and inside the business logic POS file, you will see the units and the shared code. So maybe you can open that. So of course you have to design the specific units for each framework, and then you can,
right?
Yeah. So you have to define conditional compile flags. I guess that VCL and FMX already have one, and then you can reuse them. And for the web look, we have our own define. And then you can, in the BME logic class, you can then start writing your code whenever you are accessing FNC. So there's here and there are some conditional defines, but you immediately see that the business logic layer is shared between all the different frameworks.
And the need for these conditional defines is given by the restrictions of the target platform and not by the restrictions of the framework. Because, for example, if you work in what you see a lot is if you work with local file systems, file names, and all these things, you don't have those in the web because the web application is running inside of the browser in a, I think sandbox is the term I'm allowed to use. And so you have to switch to different things if you work for the web, and you can't offer certain things with writing files to hard disk and stuff. Those things have to be looked at. But in this case, here you also see the form, which is the same thing for each of the frameworks. You basically use you create the class that we just looked at, and that's it. So let's just run this. Oh, it uses the dashboard components. Is that correct? Okay, that's why that's why the dashboard components, right?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I mean, this is why we're doing this live and not like this is exactly what the intent of this is, that we show you how easy it is to do these things.
Well, and debugging can be really useful. I've had a number of presentations I've done live before where something goes wrong and I do something to fix it. And someone's like, whoa, hold on. How did you do that? That blew my mind. And I'm like, what? Did what?
Exactly. This gives me the opportunity to show that TMS, if you buy a license, you get the source code, and source code means you have the ability. I rarely use the installer. I simply grab the group project file, which you can select in Delphi like here, and then TMS provides these group project files, so you can easily compile for your Delphi version. I use Sydney, which is version 13. I don't know. It starts at XE7. I don't know how the counting works. But we're at 13 now with Sydney, and then I simply right-click the project group and click Build All. And it's the only problem is if you make so many changes to the IDE, sometimes, you know, here we go, the components are being added. And this is for the VCL. So now we have the design time support for all the controls in the VCL. We can do the same thing for FireMonkey. And this is the design time, Peter, is that correct? Like that integrates into the IDE, this one? For visitors?
Correct.
And yeah. So no, I mean, if they have the engineer handy, you don't want to say something that's not true. So go here, and now we can go back to the demo we just saw.
To add source code to the library path.
And I think and this is the last thing, we of course need to add the library to the source path to the library path. So language Delphi library path, and then we expand this. I'm not going to say anything about this dialog, Jim. You might. So go here, dash select. Oops, that was bad. Let's do this again. Okay, so I'll go here, FNC chart, go back. So I add the dash controls to my library path, click add, and that's it. So TMS dash is now added, save. And now the compile should work. It does.
Hey.
Yeah. And there you go. And you see here's the widget control, and so we have Jim Beanstalk, and he weighs 50 kilograms, and he is very big. So he has way too low, and you see this thing is also being calculated automatically. Okay, so this shows controls in the VCL right now.
Now, is that a grid there, or what is that to the right? Is that, what control is that?
Well, I don't remember exactly. Let me take a look.
So
I guess it's
the key thing is we can export this to PDF. I mean that really always it's a grid, yeah. It always blows me away if I see this, because we can create PDF images using FNC, PDF files using FNC, and most FNC controls, I might say, have easy exports to PDF, what you see right here. So the grid, as Peter just said, and the dashboard control can easily be drawn on the canvas of the PDF, so you can create PDF files. And that is very good if you want to offer export of your data to the PDF format. And PDF is usable in all the platforms, if I'm not mistaken. And a new feature even is that you can use PDF, create PDF files, I should say, in TMS WEB Core application without a server side. Is that correct? Like, you can create those PDF files on the client now. So there are no restrictions, so to speak. The same demo now in FireMonkey. Or do you expect any problems because I don't have my library path updated, Peter?
Okay.
So we go to FireMonkey, same demo, PDF-lib, BMI. This is still set to group project. I always get a heart attack if that happens, but so here we go, demo, open, no. So same thing, same units. Again, the UBL unit that we just looked at, and the form unit is also the same. And if we run this, you can see it uses FireMonkey specific things now. And this is all done by the FNC framework. So I missed the FNC grid.
I think you need to add the library path as well to FMX.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh, because it's that's the problem. What do we? Because this is problem. I don't want to compile to Android. It was set to Android for whatever reason. There we go. So this is now the FireMonkey application. Same user interface, same controls, and if I export it to PDF, I got the same result with the same source code. So, and as you also saw, I could change the target platform now without any problems. So these, I only have Android installed right now on the FireMonkey side, but if you install more FireMonkey personalities, or what do we call them, target platforms, you get them here as well.
Holger, there's a question here about that first tab that you have there that says WUPPDIWP right next to the demo in your IDE.
In my, oh, Whoopty. This one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the start page from Daniel Wolf. He created his own start page as part, there was like a presentation in Germany how to extend the Delphi IDE with great stuff, and he built his whole session based on this start page. So if you Google Daniel, I'm going to do that on the other screen. Or welcome page, he calls it. So let's see here. Oops, I blogged about it. So here are all the steps how to install it. I wrote a 5-minute snack about it a while ago. The alternative welcome page for Delphi, and it is created by Daniel Wolf. There we go. It's in German. That's why I wrote the English version of it. And you see, you simply replace one file in your bin directory, and then your start page changes over to his start page. And then you have the ability, for example, for today, I prepared the favorites webinar. So I have all the demos here that I wanted to show today. So you can, it also has like recently used projects and recently used files managed automatically. So that's what the whoopty is. It's tough to explain. Bruno will certainly agree how to translate whoopty into English. Kind of means like snap, you know. it means like quick and easy. You know, it's a quick and easy welcome page. That's what you would translate it to. Okay.
Got it. So there are a couple of questions here. Bruno's been answering. The Raspberry Pi is via the Lazarus component library, LCL, and the Linux support via Delphi is through Delphi's Linux support in FMX Linux, which Bruno's saying is only tested on Ubuntu. Although my experience has been that while we Embarcadero officially supports Ubuntu and Red Hat, every Linux distro I've tested it on, it works as long as you install the right required components packages. So I would expect that it should work everywhere as well. But
I tested a couple. I tested like SUSE, Fedora, all of those, and they all worked fine. I didn't see any problems with. Basically, if you get the PA server to run, it works. You know, because the PA server is the thing that you need, and then it copies everything over.
Actually, I had one Linux distro that I couldn't get the PA server to run on, but I was able to manually copy it over. I don't remember which one that was. It was like a really obscure one. But anyway, there was a question, though, also about database bindings, whether live bindings was there. And Bruno said that the live binding support's limited. It's one direction data to control. And but it doesn't work on all platforms because live bindings is specific to VCL and FireMonkey. But you said that they does support classic database bindings. Like, is that like data-aware controls then, Bruno, that where you can assign a data source to the controls?
Well, we have, for example, for the grid, we have
looking for that one.
Database adapter. So actually, we have a kind of bridge component that makes a component such as the grid DB aware in the classic VCL approach, which is the approach that works in all the frameworks that we support.
Yeah, so just an example, if you have something from FireDAC, like in a query, then you can define your data source, T-data source, and hook your data source to your query. And then the grid data, for example, if you want to display data in a grid, you would link the data source to the grid database adapter and the grid. Guess what? You have the FNC grid, and you drop that on the form, and then you can link the grid to there. And now the grid is being fed by this construct. So you can use the standard T data source. I don't know if API is the right term, but and that works for each of the. It's more of like I would say in order not to change that, the control stays the same. So there is no like DB FNC DB grid or DB FNC grid. Instead, the grids use the data provider approach using these adapter components, and you have these for all controls that have database functionality. It is available for the planner component, and it is also available for the Kanban board.
So like if you just wanted to bind data to like a regular edit box, that's I guess do you have a regular edit box in FNC?
We do, and I think can we bind to that, Peter? How would that work?
Well, I guess it inherits from T-edit of T custom edit, so I guess that it will take over live bindings, but there is no database FNC adapter equivalent for now. So
that makes sense. So I mean, the things like grids and Kanban boards and things like that are complicated to data bind in code. So you know, if you have to write a little code to populate an edit box, then that's fine. All right.
Now
let me open this one, because this is a practice.
I think it's important to note that a simple control like an edit or even a combo box, an FNC edit technically underlying will be an FMX T-edit when it's used on the FireMonkey framework. It will be underlying a VCL T-edit when it's used on the VCL application. It will be actually when you run this in a web application, it will map on a WEB Core T-edit, but the WEB Core T-edit is an HTML input element. So what I want to say is that anything that is for these basic controls available in the framework and where it maps on native operating system classes and where it already supports things like live bindings, all these things are automatically exposed because it is really the native control that is in these, I call them simple controls, that is used. We are not anywhere emulating or simulating or kind of creating our own edit control. No, that also means, and I think that has the advantage, that on every platform it uses these specific whatever details there are. An edit control is quite sophisticated if you look at the detailed behavior on all the different operating systems. So you have the real experience in that area. A grid, of course, there is no native grid-like thing in an operating system. So there we built this from the ground up. And of course, there we have to provide the data binding capabilities. And as Holger said, that is done via an adapter component, a bridge component. And we use this approach so that obviously, because then you only have one grid component and not like in the VCL a T string grid and a T DB grid. No, there is one grid component, and that is bound through the database via a bridge. That is the approach that we are using.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I also found here you see the live bindings are here, but also what Bruno said, as soon as you use live bindings, of course, you limit yourself with your data binding to one platform, FireMonkey in this case. You would not be able to use the same approach if you have in mind that at some point you want to do the same user interface in a web scenario, because TMS WEB Core doesn't have live bindings like FireMonkey has, and there are other mechanisms to make that work. And here you also see the adapter, the database adapter that feeds the planner. This is actually the first demo we had prepared to show you. The screenshot that you saw with the planner component with the resources and it is connected to a data source using the Planner database adapter, and the connection is being not set up at design time, if I see that correctly, but in code. And here's the database adapter. And we also have other non-visual controls. This is something we haven't said at all so far. So far, we've only seen visual controls, but there's also non-visual controls in FNC, like this one, that are not controls but components. So FNC components are also available that are not controls that are drawn on a form. And at first you're like, yeah, what's the special thing? Well, the special thing is that you build components that are compatible with all the different frameworks that we just mentioned. And in the VCL, you have a certain way to build non-visual controls, and the same thing applies to FireMonkey, WEB Core, and LCL. And FNC once again gives you a generic approach to build components encompassing all these frameworks by providing their own means to build custom components. Did I say that right, Peter, that was your intent also to make it possible to build custom components for FNC that are then multi-platform?
You mean the non-visual ones?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, that was a technical issue. So we needed to have a VCL version and an FMX version. And when descending from T component, you can only register it once. So, but we needed to have a different functionality, and therefore we inherited from a visual T custom control and made it a small square with the resource that draws itself on the form. So that's actually a visual control, not a non-visual. So that's the reason behind the way we designed it.
So you see I find it fascinating because like you have a concept that's usually because the way, and not to hurt you, Jim, but the way Delphi is built, it would be a restriction, but TMS in this case gives you, with its framework, a means to even do this encompassing the VCL, FireMonkey, and other frameworks. So I think that's rather great to mention, you know. And let's be real.
I wouldn't say that hurts. That's just an accurate description of their FireMonkey and VCL are two different frameworks, whereas FNC creates a bridge between the two.
I think the reason for that is because Delphi initially only had one framework, the VCL, and then FireMonkey was added, and so without these things even in mind, that was the case. So I'll just introduce this demonstration in a little bit more detail. What I like about this demo, if you download the trial from the TMS page, it gives you instructions on the right, what is possible and what can be done. And the new thing here in this demo is that you have people that are resources, and you can, in addition to just a text or representation, you have also like an icon or a glyph. And what makes this glyph special in particular, that is a huge topic that I see it with my customers. They've never dealt with these things before, and now that the world is opening up to the web and mobile platforms, more and more people, even on the desktop platform, are touched by it, that this image has to be rendered on different displays with different resolutions and densities. You know, if you think the iPhone started it all with Apple introducing the Retina display way back, and you actually have an image that is, let's say, 64 pixels wide and high, and then you show it on an Apple display, and it is only, back in the day, 32 pixels wide and high, because the resolution is higher. And this has become known as high DPI in the development world, and your applications have to be ready for that. And the great thing about FNC, it is ready for these things using, in this case, vector images. So these images are all vectors, and they can be scaled and will be scaled automatically for all the different display resolutions that you will occur. So this not only works for, let's say you have an Android device and it gets smaller or wider. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about the fact that this image, if I were able to show this with the webinar software, if I were to switch my display to the correct resolution, this image would actually only be a quarter of its size if it were rendered without the functionality that FNC has included to scale it appropriately for the display resolution and density. And the VCL, for example, has also special controls included now, like the virtual image list, and all these controls can also be used with these vector images. So that is also very important to point out, that FNC does not only pay attention to the different platforms with regards to image sizes and alignment and stuff, but also with technical details, so you don't have to do the work in your own source code. Yeah, you can edit and move the appointments. You can see right here. And another thing that is included with the specific planner control in this case, you can edit these appointments. You have like functionality like recurrency included. And these dialogues, that is why it looks this way, is available for all the different platforms, for the web, for mobile. So you don't have to think of anything if you use this planner control. All these things are going to be available, designed for the specific platform. And apart from the PDF, is there something I have forgotten to point out in this example, Peter or Bruno? That makes it.
I want to see it. I want to see it in the web.
Okay, okay. So the PDF export, just to show it real quick, this is actually the first instance where the vector looks better, because obviously a PDF has a resolution of 600 dpi and a computer screen has a resolution of 96 dpi, or if it's not high dpi. So this image is actually rendered, if we zoom in, this is actually rendered crystal sharp. No matter if we would have used in the application, in the Delphi application, if we would have used a bitmap or a PNG, it would be pixelated, and it doesn't get pixelated. I could size this up as much as I want. It will never get pixelated. It's always going to be crystal sharp. And that's just great if you work with mobile devices in particular, like, or the new, not to advertise certain models here, I just know the Microsoft Surface, for example, when I bought it, it is by default, it goes into zoom mode like 300%, meaning the resolution is very, very high.
I love that about SVGs. And actually, when you're showing this thing, I had to build a solution that had functionality like this years ago. And I wish I should have had this. Oh my goodness, it would save me so much time and so much effort. That is fantastic.
So we've left out the web. Let me see if I compile it. Hopefully it's, set everything up. Here we go, looking good, perfect. So this is the example from before, but we're now inside of a web browser. And that really shows you the power of FNC, that you can transfer your applications from a desktop application. You imagine yourself, this is where the form would be, and it is just inside of a web browser now. You see here, this is the development server that is being provided by TMS if you compile a web application with TMS WEB Core. You see that right here. So this is something that happens automatically because TMS WEB Core is integrated into the Delphi IDE or Red Studio IDE. So you can run your applications, you can debug your applications right out of the IDE. So it is not not an experience that wouldn't be supported just as good as desktop development. So, and just to see that it works, so this guy weighs 120 pounds and is only 140, so should be in the red zone. Yep. So, and again, the export to PDF, you see even here is a tiny dialog and stuff. So that works as well. I don't know why it's not popping up. Oh, there it is. See? PM. So the PDF is being generated client side. There is no going back and forth between the server, and the PDF is then delivered as a download that I can then open, and this has been generated on the client. Okay.
Actually, I will put a link in the chat real quick. Not related to FNC, but if you are interested in the WEB Core, TMS WEB Core, Embarcadero is offering a deal right now for Enterprise and Architect. You can get WEB Core as a free add-on for only a few more days. Don't tell anybody I told you that. So if you are interested and you're not on the latest version of Delphi, take advantage of that right now, and you can get TMS WEB Core, and then maybe I would suggest adding FNC. You know, I want to make a couple comments here about FNC. I saw when you first announced this, and I thought it was really a neat technology. But if I remember correctly, that was before WEB Core, or about the same time you had WEB Core, and it didn't have the WEB Core functionality in FNC. And then in preparing for this, and I went out to your website and read through FNC, and I'm like, wow, it's way more to it now than there was originally. It's really exciting. I am really excited about it, and my brain's going, oh, all these projects now I want to build with FNC.
I mean, the most important thing is, that is something obviously that as I do a lot of the videos and the tutorials and stuff, if you see FNC, don't think, oh, I'm a VCL developer, I can't use it, or I'm a FireMonkey developer, I can't use it. That's exactly the wrong approach. That's exactly, you're the target audience for these controls, because you might do VCL today, and then you get a customer and said, hey, it would be kind of cool if I had parts of the application, not the whole application, in the web, and you would be well prepared if you use these FNC controls, because they work out of the box on the web in FireMonkey. So you would save a lot of time doing that. And what for me, I mean, I'm not the youngest anymore. Having the same method and same property name over all the platform helps.
I was actually in Australia a few years ago, and I was talking to one of the organizers for the event there, and she said that she was thinking she needed to make the shift to FireMonkey to do mobile, and then she saw FNC, and she's like, well, I'm just going to get FNC. So she bought FNC, figuring instead of learning FireMonkey, she would learn FNC and know that then she could use that suite of components across all platforms, no matter what comes up, like you were just saying, which I think that was a really interesting use case.
And there's no downside, because you get the source code. It's not like that only you have the VCL source code, but TMS gives you the source code, so you can see everything of the magic that is going on in there. And this is the demo that Bruno wanted to see. This is the planner inside of the web. We just use different icons, so bear with us here. But everything else is the planner component. And if I click on an appointment, there you go. I get the start time, end time, the dialog. And I think these are, correct me if I'm wrong, these are also date edit controls. Is that correct, Peter? That you can you can easily modify the date. And you can also, for example, there's like validation in there. So if you say we have a start time on February 12th, I'm on a US system. I apologize for all European viewers. It's switched. So if I can't go beyond February, I can do here, and now I can go to January. So this is actually validated on the fly. It's not like that you have to post, like that you have to okay, and then you get an error message. Your user is actually not able to enter incorrect information in this dialog, which makes it great. So this is all things these little things that you get out of the box make it so valuable, because I mean, we've all implemented these things. I mean, years ago when I was still in college, I had to write my first web application. Customer, while I was doing work as a student, asked for a web application. I had to write this all manually. You had to like write your own Ajax JavaScript methods in ASP.NET in order to, when user leaves this edit box, then check that the date is bigger than this date and smaller than this date. But this is all something that is integrated in this dialog, and it's platform. It's not platform specific. So this dialog works the same way on a desktop and on the web. And also the resources here, this drop down is obviously fed based on the information that is being displayed inside of the calendar. So this is something I haven't mentioned it also for, but these resources and the appointments, let me go into the source code of this, of the control. Where is the, it is a little bit difficult to show. I think, let's see here. Oh no, it's not difficult to show. So here you even see that on the web, we have different data sources. We have a web client data set and we have a web data source. And then the adapter once again ties the this data source to the planner. So this is where you already see how flexible it is, that you can tie any data source to the adapter to show any kind of information inside of the planner control. And what I wanted to show is that all these things, of course, are like the appointments are items. If I found here, the resources are properties inside of the planner control. So here you have the list of resources. So you can add resources to the planner control, like you add lines of text to a memo control, for example. It's all integrated into the Delphi language. FNC is not something that makes everything different and you have everything neutral. No, it uses existing Delphi concepts of the language to and opens up with great controls, just like you did it for years and years with a VCL. And now you would pick the FNC control, and you can still do it with the VCL. There's no difference there. The only difference is if ever you want to use FireMonkey or the web, you can use the same control without buying a different component set, without having to learn a new component set. You can use the same thing for the other platform.
Awesome. I forgot I had some polls I put together that I'm going to launch real quick. And then why don't you go ahead and bring the slides back up and while I'm doing this. So the first poll is if you use TMS software components or tools. I saw Roland just shared that he's been using FNC controls for about a month now, commented about the data binding. But anyway, it's just always interesting to see how many people are using these components yet, or especially for those of you that are here, whether you're using them yet, or if you are using any TMS components. You do have a huge suite of components available from TMS. So
is my screen still visible? Because I don't think it is, because I get the message like poll is open, yeah. Poll must be. So okay, so people are answering the poll now, but I don't get the
people
poll.
Are answering the poll. You can't answer it. You're a presenter.
Okay.
But once they finish answering it, then I'll switch back to your screen sharing again.
Okay, I just need to know. So I'll put the slide on and wait for it a little bit.
All right, so it looks like I think most people have voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Oh, it didn't display the results. Oh, there we go. Share. So there's the results of the poll. Looks like most people here are already using them. About 68% of people are already using them. A couple people used to. A couple people use them all, and a few people aren't using them yet. So the next poll I have actually is, I guess for those of you that are using TMS components, which ones are you using? And unfortunately, the slide or the poll system is restricted to how many options I can provide. So I just did the general categories of components, but I could not possibly get into all of the different components that our TMS offers. Such a huge variety of components there. I used your, was it Cloud Pack a while back? That was a really neat one. I really thought it was really powerful component suite, which I was excited to see is part of FNC as well, so that I can use the same cloud components in both VCL and FireMonkey as well as web. So that was I thought was really fantastic. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this poll up because it looks like people are answering quicker now than they were earlier. So if you haven't answered yet, quick and get your vote in there on which components. Go ahead and check all the ones that you're using. Okay, so which components? Most people are using the VCL components, but we do have a good chunk of people also using the FNC components now. So that's great. We'll have to. If you have any questions, for those of you that are using FNC, if you have any questions about FNC, now's a great time to get those asked. We got the experts online with us now on that. And so I'm going to go ahead and switch it back to you, Holger, so that you can share your screen. There you go.
Okay, I just had a drink, so.
Oh, good.
Get some water. I apologize for the rough segue. So, yeah, you just mentioned the Cloud Pack. Of course, we have a slide prepared for that as well. And Cloud Pack originated, correct me if I say something wrong, in the VCL, and then there was also a separate FireMonkey set of the component pack. And it gives you access to cloud services. And Bruno can, of course, tell you the history, how they started out, because I have to be honest, I joined TMS when the component pack already existed and a great number of services was there. But for me, the key pillars of the Cloud Pack are data storage, meaning you can access the Google Drive, your OneDrive, and these kind of box. So for data storage, and also the TMS specific service, the My Cloud Data service to store information in the cloud. But then the next pillar is to also access communication aspects like email, calendar, contacts from different providers. The biggest ones, of course, are Google and Microsoft. Then the payment services like PayPal and SumUp to make electronic payments easily, and then also get information about other social media services, let's call them that. And here we have right now YouTube, and the services are a little bit different for the FNC right now as for the VCL pack. As far as I know, I think the VCL pack has a few more still. Is that correct, Bruno? That the VCL covers a few more?
Yes, that's correct. So everything indeed started. I actually lost in what year exactly we did the first VCL components for accessing REST services. Like I believe that the very first component that, and I remember that I wanted to do something with Google Drive. And that was actually what triggered us to start creating these components. But as I said, initially, indeed, it was VCL based, VCL only. And this original collection of components, VCL Cloud Pack, is probably till this point still the largest collection. The thing is that when we started to unify everything, well, let me explain what our major motivations were to create the FNC Cloud Pack. First of all, of course, we thought that it was interesting if you would have one cloud component for, let's say, Google Drive, and you can use that component in whatever application that you want to create, VCL, FMX, LCL, or web. So that was one of the main motivations to move all the cloud components to FNC. But another motivation was to re-architect these components. And I clarify that in the original VCL version, the underlying HTTP layer that we use is based on the Windows WinEnet API. And we use that in its synchronous form, which means that if you make an underlying request in these cloud components to the REST API service, and this REST API service is returning its response quite slow, then it will cause your UI, it can cause glitches or freezing in your UI if you just do it on the main thread. If you don't do anything special and you use these components in the main UI thread, it will freeze the UI thread. And so another major important motivation to move things to the FNC and thereby re-architect everything was because now in FNC Cloud Pack, everything is asynchronously implemented. So however you use these components, if you use them out of the box on your form, in the main UI thread underlying, everything is still asynchronously handled. And that means that your UI will never freeze. That's also especially important on mobile devices, where network speed is often not stable and can go down. And so with this asynchronous approach, you never have issues in the UI. And then our goal was to move everything over to FNC, everything that we had before in VCL, everything that we have in the FMX Cloud Pack. But I would say that through the years, there have been services that aren't popular. There are also services that stopped, that went out of business that we supported in the VCL Cloud Pack. There are services that make it way harder to interface with. I give one example, which is the Instagram REST API. I don't know what the guys from Google think, but initially you could do everything with this API. And then like year by year, they reduced functionality of the API and made it harder and harder to get an client ID to access these APIs. And so these are then obviously things that we haven't moved over to FNC. So we look at what is used most and have already moved that over. And of course, all the new developments, if we identify new interesting services to cover in the FNC Cloud Pack, that actually now goes first to the FNC Cloud. One example here is the SumUp payment services. This is something we added recently, and this is something done from scratch directly on the FNC Cloud framework, and at this moment only available in the FNC Cloud Pack.
One interesting or one very important fact to point out is that the asynchronicity nowadays is not only nice to have, you know, it is actually a requirement. Like if you develop on iOS devices, you will not get your application into the Apple Store because they test these things. And if your application is irresponsive for 5 seconds, Apple tosses the app off the device. It actually stops the app. So there is no alternative anymore than to use asynchronous technology. And Bruno was modest, but you guys also did a great update with these things. You started to, after Delphi started offering anonymous methods, you offered this in your framework more and more and more, and also on the web. And that means the FNC framework also now offers a lot of variety how to implement these things. You cannot, one is of course using event handlers, that if something is ready, or received that you can provide an event. But TMS also offers a lot of stuff where you can pass the event as an anonymous method in a method call, which makes programming these things much easier than before, I would say, because you can immediately see how your code is going to flow. And if you have received a certain result from a cloud service, you can process the result in the anonymous method. And another thing I think you need to point out is that you do an amazing job to encapsulate the data types into Delphi specific objects, meaning if a service has certain things like you can use Delphi objects very easily without having to work with any encodings or records, or it's all wrapped nicely in Delphi specific stuff. And I can show you a pretty good example how easy it is to work with these things. If Peter doesn't have anything to add to that, I just show one of the examples. Because
I want to make a quick shout out. We have on asynchronous programming, we have a webinar tomorrow with Dahlia to talk about her new book on the topic of event-based and asynchronous programming. So if you want to learn more about working with that, join us tomorrow.
And we also have in the hands-on book series, we mentioned that we did books, but in the hands-on book series, we have like also asynchronous examples for working with web services and stuff. That's also in there. So there's lots of book content available now with regards to Delphi. So something that TMS started doing as well is to wrap different, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bruno, but you wrap, basically you provide one component, and then you have a service property, and then you can select the service that you want to use that functionality with. For example, you do this with the translation service right here, but I could also find a specific, like for logging, for logger. You have like different log services that we can use with it. So you use this. So not only do we have like a component that we can use in different frameworks, like a VCL, FireMonkey, and the web, but now we also have like the possibility to have one component and use that one component with different service providers, which makes it even more flexible because you can select at runtime which service is used. So you can offer software that is not even bound to a specific provider, but you could even leave it to your users to select which provider to use. And there's lots of great examples. For example, here the translation is, I think, the most visual one for a cloud service to use. Let's run it in the VCL. So the only thing is, so you see here, we bound the service to a combo box, and we select Google. And what I did, hopefully, let me check real quick, that I set the password jar in this. I set it to X. So if I insert my Google key, which I have prepared on the other screen, if I copy this and paste it into the demo. So this is something you need to request from each provider. You need to request a specific key. So the provider, Google in this case, knows who you are. And then I retrieve the supported languages. These are the languages they support. And now I have like, hello world, this is a new line. Translating text is easy. This is obviously English, and let's translate it to, is that German? Yes, of course, there's German. Translate. And this is the text in German. And you already see here, it is having not any issues with specific characters. And if we translate it to Arabic, we even see there's full Unicode support. And this is VCL. Believe me, if we ran this in the web, we would also have the same result. What I love is the fact that you can like detect languages. Like here, we just want to detect what language it is. It says it's English. So this should most likely Yeah, be German. Yes, it is German. And so it means this gives you really cloud services at your fingertips very easily, and different cloud services without having to decide on a certain service for your customers. And for example, retrieve supported languages, it's just one method call, get supported languages, and that's it. And the result, of course, because everything is asynchronous, you go to the events, and then here you have an event on get supported languages, double click, and you get a wonderful t-stringless parameter, which you've been working with on, I don't know for how many years as a Delphi developer, and you get a list of all the languages. So no specific data type. And if you are interested in the inner workings, what is going on, like HTTP wise, communication wise, you get the request where you can get all the information back to the data package, so to speak, with a JSON and everything if you wanted to look at that. So that is an example what makes FNC Cloud Pack really, really great, because you can access all these services for each platform very, very easily. The only thing you need is a key from the provider you want to use, and then you have this technology included. And there's like stuff to read barcodes and other stuff. And PayPal is not to be underestimated. If your software needs payment services with Summon and PayPal, I think there's these two in the FNC Cloud Pack right now. You can provide payment for your software and all these things using the cloud services. And again, and this is something I don't want to really go over there. Maybe Jim and I will have a separate webinar at some point about that. You can extend FNC Cloud Pack very, very easily because TMS provides base classes that you can build components for your own services. And I'm really not going to open it up, but go to my blog, and we have videos about building your own services for the devices that you might have in your house. Like in my case, it was a little, I'm wearing it right now, actually. Here it is, the Fitbit tracker. And it allows you to monitor your heart rate, your sleep patterns, and all that kind of stuff. And I think we have 3 videos online right now. And there will be one more, how you can access other web APIs easily using the base classes that are provided by TMS. With what it facilitates is that cloud services have common methods to authenticate and authorize what you can access, and TMS provides classes that makes this very easy to implement in Delphi, so you can concentrate on the data transfer back and forth and don't have to get into those details.
Yeah, Holger, maybe one more. Well, you mentioned briefly with the translation component that it can use different services, but we apply the same technique, for example, with the cloud storage component. And I think that's an important thing to remark, and a direction where we definitely want to go further in, which is offering components that make the actual service that you use, make it agnostic to that. And I think the importance here is that it allows you to avoid any lock-in with specific service providers. If, for example, you have based some cloud storage on Google Drive, and for some reasons you don't like Google Drive anymore, or Google decides to change pricing, or whatever happens, or some customer already has storage on another service provider, it takes you just one property and of course a different API key, but that's all it takes. All the other application logic stays 100% the same. It's just 2 properties actually to switch, and you are up and running with another service provider. Or you can even think about adding a customization or a settings dialog in your application where you let your customers choose what cloud storage in the back will be used in connection with your application that you create. So that's definitely a direction that we will go into even further going forward to make it really service agnostic.
Yeah, and this service agnostic, this wonderful word means that no matter which service you use, if you want to download from a file service, you always call the same methods, like you call cloud storage services component, the name, and then .download. That is the method you call, no matter if you use, and let's list them real quick, if you use Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, Ubic, or Microsoft OneDrive. No matter which service you use, you always call connect, download, or upload, delete, create folder, open folder. Those are what the methods are called. And you always implement the same events. And I'm quite sure that in addition to using the events, you can always, like, for example, here the onConnected is called. If you call this looks a little bit detailed, because this demo application makes it easy to set the client key and all that stuff for all providers at the same time. That's why this method looks very verbose, but it all comes down to only this one, the connect. And I'm quite sure, I hope I'm not setting myself up to fail here, but I think the connect also has parameters that you can provide what happens after the connect right away without using the event with an anonymous method. I don't know if the cloud storage service is implemented yet, but that is usually the case, that you cannot only use the onConnect event. Most of the time, you also have the ability to provide an anonymous method. And I think Peter is a good source of information. Like I think you try to always offer both worlds, like anonymous method or event. Is that correct? Because the event obviously has the downside that you assign one event either in the object inspector or in code. But if you want to use separate events based on certain things, anonymous methods have their advantages.
Yes, I think you can show the translation again, which has methods available that have an anonymous callback. So you can actually translate to separate strings and capture the result. So now the demo is not using that because of, for example, in Lazarus, there are no anonymous methods, but I'm sure that if you use translate or detect, that you have the ability to specify a callback.
Here you see it. This is exactly what I mean. And this makes working with these methods really, really great. Like if you just want to translate a text, you say translate, you pass a string, and then the language, that's ISO norm, EN for English, DE for German, and so on. And you can get the list of available languages with another method call. But here, this is the key. You can define a method right here and there that either you provide a method, the name of a method that is part of this class, or you even just provide the code at this space in this space as a parameter, so you have it linked right there. No need to provide a event. And if you do not set a callback or pass nil, that is when the control, if we get this in the object inspector, will most likely use something like on translate right here when the translation is finished. So you have all the options how you prefer to implement your things. And I think, and we had it initially, if Jim hadn't mentioned it before, we had thought to put the mapping first, because that I think is which got you the idea to build these components that have multiple services included in them, because that was the initial idea where you use this for the first time, or TMS used it for the first time, to use one component, a mapping component, a component to display a map, and then you could select the service if you wanted it to be Google or any other service. Is that correct, Bruno? Or did I get the order wrong?
Yes, that's correct. The mapping component, the mapping was actually the first place where we came up with this idea of making things service agnostic. And I think it very much makes sense for mapping in particular, because we have experienced ourselves that different map services have different subtle differences, have different pricing levels, from totally free like OpenStreetMaps to here maps, which is a different price level. We have seen that, for example, the directions functionality that mapping services, almost all of them offer, there are differences in the quality of the directions that you get out of these services. And by making this service agnostic, you can actually get the best result from the service you want and mix them. You can use directions from one service and the map visualization from another service. You can use the geolocation from one service and display the results on another map. And so you can mix all these things as it gives for you the best result, or it gives for you the cheapest result, or your customer has some specific preference. You can just choose it by a switch of a property.
Yeah, and that's what we just see here. We have the service set to Google now. I had to supply an API key for that. And this is a Google map. So you have all the things, not only in code, but you can specify rectangles even in the object inspector. You can define markers in the object inspector. So you could even do this inside here. But in addition to that, let me rename that real quick. We do map. You can do map dot. You can add a marker. You can add a polyline. You can add a polygon, a circle, and all these things. And that is something that is unique. That is not unique to one provider. That is available for all the mapping providers that are supported. And that's quite a lot with this framework. You have Azure, you have Bing, Google, here, Mapbox, MapKit, OpenLayers, which is Open Maps, and TomTom. And you don't have to think of or distinguish while writing code which one of those your customers are using or you want to use. The only thing you need to do, let me push this over here again so you don't see it, is the API key. That is the only thing you need to specify if you want to use a certain service. And then the implementation is the same. And Bruno mentioned it already. The great thing is you can mix, meaning, for example, if you are in the United States, Google and Apple have a MapKit is Apple, by the way. That's what I should say. Like MapKit is Apple Maps. They just call it MapKit. Google and Apple are pretty good with their visual appearance from the maps. However, direction-wise, especially if you are in the logistics world, there are better partners to have. So if you look, the direction is a different component in FNC Maps. It's the TMS FNC directions. And there again, you have different providers that you can use to calculate detailed steps from getting from A to B. Again, different API keys. So you could set this to, for example, you can set the service to TomTom and your TomTom API key, and then you can calculate the route, get all the different steps of the route. Again, everything is implemented asynchronously, meaning if you request directions at some point, the onGet directions is called, And the directions component is so comfortable. You can also use anonymous methods. And then, and this is what makes it so great, you can draw the result, like how to drive from A to B on the map, but completely loosely coupled from the directions provider you use. And this is not only true for the directions, that is also true for other components in the mapping world that are included in FNC Maps. FNC Maps has not only the maps, directions, but also for geocoding, meaning like converting an address into coordinates, but also for geolocation, meaning to determine the position where you are. And every time you have, for geolocation, you have Google and IPStack. Those two providers offer that functionality. And let's say you determine the position where you are, then you can go on and draw this on a map. And the map can be whatever provider you want it to be. And in addition to that, we also now have elevation. That is also a service, a feature for different services. AirMap, Google, and MapQuest offer that. And again, you can draw it on any of the maps and use it with other of the direction services. For example, if you want to calculate the best route in with regards to elevation, you can do that using these components and linking them together in your code. And another thing, and that is something that Bruno said, you try to use what makes mapping. You have like putting markers on a map and drawing on a map, but there's still some things that are special to certain providers, and that is also something that you can cover with FNC Maps, because there is the FNC Google Map, which includes specific information, specific things that only Google offers. For example, clusters, meaning if you have lots of points on a map, you can create a cluster of markers. And then the same thing, TomTom has specific things that are important for if you work in the logistics world for trucking and that kind of thing. So you can use all these with the specific components, but as soon as you choose one of the specific components, you can no longer use the same thing. For example, if you use Google Maps, you cannot be sure that you have the cluster technology in the TomTom map, for example. So as long as you use the general component, you have joint features that are available for all providers, but you're not restricting yourself using FNC Maps, because there's also special components for these providers. And that makes it much more easy to handle. And this is something both Peter and Bruno, I'm quite sure, will attest. If you have different frameworks plus different service providers, the FNC world gives you much more efficient ways to produce new versions for your customers without making it difficult, because before you had like Google Maps for the VCL, or still have, I shouldn't say past, I don't want to imply that you discontinued anything. You still have the Google Maps as a VCL component, right? And you have it as a FireMonkey component. And this way you were able to, with the FNC, you bring it to all the platforms at the same time, at the same level. Did I say that right, Bruno, in a way? That is also an advantage for your customers?
Mm-hmm.
That because if a new version of FNC Maps is released, the whole functionality is available to all the platforms. This is what is a major advantage.
Exactly.
So the lag between like, if VCL Google Map has it, no, if you have it for the FNC technologies, it's available for all the and something I always forget, and Bruno, I don't know how many emails Bruno has written to me when I produced a video for him that I forgot the web, because this is also available on the web, TMS WEB Core. So you have this great mapping functionality also in your web browser, in web applications. We have one thing
While you're switching, I'm going to show real quick. I put a link in the chat, but here are the two books. They're blurring, that Holger has written on the hands-on Delphi. Dang it, let me turn the blur off. Hands-on with Delphi is two versions of this, book 1 and book 2. And book 1 talks about some of the FNC components, but then book 2 specifically gets into the mapping components, and it's a much thicker book. So if you are interested in the FNC maps, it's a great resource right there. You can grab up on Amazon.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, because
absolutely.
this is also an example from the book, which shows, and Bruno loves this, I'm sure, this example, because it shows like this is the general map component where you choose a certain provider. In this case, we choose Google, and we have separate of that the geocoding and the direction component. So the geocoding is used in this case. The example is that you have a company, and your company needs to estimate the cost to drive to a customer. And I hard-coded in this case the address from the Belgium office from TMS. This is hard-coded as a string. And the application actually calculates the geocoordinates for this and then offers an estimate to drive to the customer. And this is, again, VCL application, but it uses FNC components. And so let's say your customer is located here and you want to estimate the cost. You can use the directions control to estimate the distance and the duration that you need to drive there. And you see here, these are the offices, and this is the fake customer. I just picked an address from the map, and you can see I draw the route that is being established from the directions component on a Google map with the general component. And I could switch to another provider just like that. I've never tried it, but let's just switch to one that doesn't
a question related to that, actually, whether it includes tolls, and Peter answered that yes, it does.
Since the latest release, so if that's correct, like if you can get a route that avoids tolls, and that is a new feature of version 1.3. So here now I switched over to Open Maps. You can clearly see that it looks different. And now you see that the same thing works in Open Maps with so the marker is drawn on the map in Open Maps, and the route is being drawn on the map. And it took me 1 second to make the switch, and the whole application still works even though we switched from Google to a completely different mapping provider. And the route itself is still calculated with the provider that I have set in the direction component, which is, in this case, Google. So the route is still calculated with Google, but it's drawn on a different map. And so again, just like with the Cloud Pack, you cannot only switch between different services, you can also switch between the frameworks. So this is a VCL application. I could do the same thing in FireMonkey or the web. And one thing I've completely forgot. So let me run this again and estimate the cost. I always forget our friend Adrian here. Reporting. So all these things integrate nicely with other products from TMS. Like this is an example for Flexcel. I can easily create a report using an Excel template, export it to PDF, and here is the step-by-step how to get from A to B, which once again shows you TMS gives you Delphi classes, Delphi objects to read the distance, the time that you need, and the cost is fake. I simply multiply the distance and the time with a fixed value to generate this report. But this report itself is an Excel template right here, and So you can easily data bind your FNC map classes to reports defined in Excel, and your customers do not need Excel. This is something that is all inside of the executable. You can generate a PDF, and that even works on TMS WEB Core, these kind of things, if you put the report generation into your backend. And Jim was so nice, he already held it up like the this direction example is explained in detail in the book, and how to put PDF reports in your web services is in the first book.
So now the that Excel report, that can be exported as an Excel document as well. It doesn't require Excel on the user's computer?
Yeah, that is what the magic of Flexcel is. You can generate Excel documents without any ODBC or anything. That is all inside of the components, and you can generate let's call them modern Excel documents with the X in the end, but you can also generate the old file formats. There's actually constants where you can specify what to use, and something I have in the works, it might be this week or early next week, I'll also show how to use the charting inside of Excel. So you can define your charts, what they should look like in Excel, and you can access them with Flexcel without Excel being installed. So you can also use it to generate charts that you design. If you have, for instance, it's good for customer base, that because I know a lot of customers that have charts defined in Excel documents, and then you can extract them as vectors or as PNG images and include them in your Delphi applications. So that's also a great thing to have.
Okay. I'm going to run another poll really quick here. Find out which frameworks everybody uses the most. Just to kind of see where they see FNC. I get, well, what frameworks they use the most, or what frameworks they want you see yourself wanting to use the most potentially as well. Which of course FNC lets you get to all these frameworks, whether it be VCL, FireMonkey, Web, or LCL. There were a few questions here. Bruno's been answering them. Always people want to see more case studies. That's something we always get asked for as well, Bruno, is everybody wants to see what our customers are using with doing other components. And I can speak from experience that case studies seem like they should be easy, but they're not ever as easy to get as you'd like for them to be, especially at the right level of detail. So,
yeah, because it's you don't want to. I mean, I can only talk about the customers that I have that make use of the great components. They don't want to share. First of all, they don't want to. They mostly don't want to share how they build their magic. You know, that's that's just the thing. You know, they are willing to say, hey, we use TMS components, but they don't want to share the magic how they use them. So.
Yep. All right. So it looks like most everybody's using VCL. With about half as many are using FireMonkey, and a few people are using Web mostly. So that's great to see. I think that's one thing. Like I mentioned before, the developer I was talking to in Australia that was saying, "Hey, I need to move from VCL to FireMonkey," and bought FNC as a bridge to do that. And I think that's a really fantastic use case for this. I mean, for me, from a technical point of view, I see FNC as being technically interesting, but then that practical example of saying, hey, I know I need to move to mobile into the web, but I'm currently a VCL developer. FNC is a great way to ease into that, if you will, to have a great flexible component set that gives you the ability to target all those platforms.
Yeah, we're already 2 hours and 45 minutes, so maybe I just mentioned the other packages that are available. So if you're interested, you can have at all these things. Yes, Bruno, go ahead.
Maybe an idea is to tell something about the FNC browser, because I know from our customer feedback that a lot of people have an interest in hosting a browser in an application, and so we also created an FNC browser, so that gives you that same code interface to the browser on all the platforms where your application can be targeted for. And we also have, I think this is particularly interesting, of course, that browser now is based on the Edge Chromium engine on Windows 10. So you get, I think, a very good browser experience in Windows now, where previously this was Internet Explorer. And not only the experience was not optimal, but the security was also an issue. So now on Windows, it's based on Edge Chromium. On Android, it's the native Android Chrome engine. On iOS and Mac, it is the Safari based engine. And what we also offer is a bridge component, and that means that you can actually that you have an interface to do things like inject JavaScript code into your page, and do all kinds of interesting communications back and forth between the web application that is running in the browser in your natively hosted browser, and you can communicate from the application to the browser and vice versa. So, and this is all available at FNC level. So what you write once, you can use on every platform where you will use these FNC components.
Can you enlighten my brain again what the name of the bridge component is? Because I tried to type it in here, but so what I did while Bruno was talking is I built this web browser pretty quickly, and there you see. I mean, this is I say it quite often that is the power of Delphi. How quick you are building stuff, but with using this approach, these components here. This makes, like what Bruno said, this component here on Windows, the browser component is the Edge browser, and if you were to use it in FireMonkey and deploy it to Android, it would become the Android browser. Is that correct, Bruno? It would become the native Android browser.
It's the Chrome engine. Peter knows the details.
Yeah, well, I was just. Yeah, it's based on Chrome. It's not exactly the same browser, but it's the same like on iOS. It uses a subversion of Safari. So on Android, it uses the WebView, which is a subversion of Chrome, the Chrome engine. So maybe Holher, there is a demo as well that demonstrates the bridge. Because now there's no non-visual component. It's programmatically being enabled. So let me take a look. I think it's under the FNC Core demo folder, and then you can pick the FMX or the VCL one, and then open that. It will show a variety of features.
I was going to ask which subpack of FNC this was part of. So it's part of the core, because I get a lot of people that come to me wanting to do what you're talking about, where you can inject JavaScript and access the source code within the T web browser component. So having that functionality there is a really big, very highly requested feature.
That's built, that's at core level. So in FNC Core is this browser and bridge, because actually we use that in FNC Maps, for example, this underlying technology. We also offer it in the FNC UI Pack, where you have a browser and can do things. And actually there are more things coming up that will be based on that technology. But I let Peter or Holger show this bridge demo.
Yeah, I'm quite sure Peter can give the technical details, because I always say, like, an evangelist just tries to shows stuff, but is not aware about the technical implications in detail. But this is certainly a web application that is being displayed inside of the Edge browser. And as you can see, it's even loaded not from a URL, but using data URL, meaning the HTML is encoded as base64. So you can include the HTML context inside of the executable if you wanted to without having external resources. And the HTML has a yes button and a no button. And I'm quite certain that all these things have an ID associated with them. And the bridge control is able to bridge the gap between your desktop application and the web world, that you can handle the events when a yes is clicked and no is clicked, but also the other way around, that you have a this is certainly a div element of some sort, and you can set it with information that is only available to the client application to display the ratio, and also add items to a ordered list inside of the HTML document for sure.
Maybe,
So,
Holger, you can press on the F12 key, and then you can see the debugger. Okay, and then you can show the JavaScript that is generated. I guess it should include a script tag in the body, just 2 lines below. I think you have the header, do you like TMS software? And then you have a script tag. If you this is the code that's being used to send messages to the client application. So it uses it uses the Windows specific Edge Chromium based JavaScript bridge technology to send to actually send messages back to the client. So you can inject your own object. It needs to be a iDispatch interfaced object, and then you can specify your properties and access like you would access them with the RTTY. So it actually opens up a new way to communicate with your client application instead of capturing them with navigating via the URL or a custom protocol. So that's an underlying technology that's being used. It's also being used in FNC maps.
Yeah, you can clearly see here that. Sorry, I didn't want that.
Yeah.
But, you can clearly see in the button element here in HTML gets an on-click event, and the on-click event is specific for the bridge component, set my bridge object message, and this message is being sent whenever we click here. And I'm quite sure if we go into the source code of this application, we find the code that that basically reacts to the button click and increments the counter at some sort. Just here we go. Update labels, and where is the message received? Here is where we set the object message. So just looking, where is the yes and the no counted? That's what I'm looking. Oh, here it is.
Yeah, so what happens is that you have a TMyBridge object class. So you can look at the definition, and you specify the interface to have the property, but you can add any property you want as long as it's a string property. And then you use the same property name inside JavaScript to access that object and actually fill in the value, and then the setter is automatically called via the invoke internally in Delphi. It's quite technical, but it uses the iDispatch interface. So it's kind of similar to what the web browser does. So then you create an instance of your TMyBridge object and pass it as an object with TMS FNC web browser.addBridge. And then
right here.
Yeah, so the code right that here. Is actually that's the code. Yeah. So and then you load your HTML, and you well, the FNC web browser has a function getBridge communication layer, which is a few lines above. So if you open that, you can know it's in code. Holger.
Oh, okay.
So maybe you can click
Right
on
here.
you can show the definition of that. You can click on it and show it in codes, perhaps. So there you can see which handlers are registered to work with the bridge object you passed as a parameter. So it's different on other platforms, of course, but for Windows specific, it's the window, Chrome, WebView host objects.
Okay.
It's Microsoft that has predefined this, and then the bridge name is actually the bridge parameter that you specify, and then you can access your object, which is actually the TMI bridge object that you passed along, and then you can access the properties.
Yeah, so
you're actually communicating directly with the object you created in Delphi.
And that way you can communicate between, and this might seem to be rather academic at first, if you just say, hey, I can throw an object from A to B, but this actually means that you can write TMS WEB Core applications that run inside of a browser, and you can then have a desktop application that interacts with this web application. Then there is many use cases for this kind of thing, that you have this sort of communication available to you, and also the ability to inject elements inside of your web browser outside from a VCL application. That gives you much more flexibility. So
well, the idea is to have a wrapper around that code, so you don't have to write code anymore. So the idea is to have a non-visual bridge component that you can drop on the form and does everything for you. And you can assign an event to receive messages or have a method to send messages to the browser. So that's the idea. But now it's currently programmatic interface.
I can testify to this, that FNC Maps, the first version that I got, everything was in code too, and that is just the steps everything goes through. That at first everything is in code, and then it becomes components that we can drop on the form, and then it's when it becomes easier for the developers like me, who just like to implement the events and set the properties and work with it. So this is really the early stage you see that will at some point become easily accessible by dropping another component here. And then this component most likely will have a reference to the browser component. And then you set up the connection with that browser component. And then this component will most likely have send message, receive message, and the receive message is an event on receive message. And that way you can communicate with things inside of the browser. And that gives you lots of flexibility at that point. And of course, not only for the VCL on a desktop, but that way you can also build native on the Android, native on the iOS device that interacts with things that are shown inside of a web browser. So there's great potential there, as Bruno said.
Yeah. So we're top of the second hour now almost. So we probably wrap up. We were trying something new here with this. I'm curious if everybody's attendees, there's still a lot of you are still here. So if you've enjoyed this as an attendee, if you would just take a second, there should be a button where you can raise your hand in your user interface. If you just raise your hand real quick, that way I can get a real quick straw poll as to how valuable you thought this was and whether you thought this would be something we should do again in the future. I know I learned a lot. Like I said, I saw FNC when you first announced it a while ago, and it's really come a long way. And especially like this last part here with the web browser, there's been a few things I really wanted to do that it's like, oh, that's what I needed right there. So that's really neat, really exciting. We didn't get to go through all the slides, but those are in the handouts. You can download those, and a lot of the information is also available on TMS's website. So were you gonna say something, Holger?
Yeah, in particular on fnc.tmssoftware.com. That's the landing page for all FNC controls and all the FNC packs. We didn't cover the charting components that are available, cross-platform, cross-framework charting. The dashboard controls are great for, and Bruno even has some videos where he shows like how these dashboards are connected to a web service and USB devices. You have a video with Tunde where you use these controls, and then also diagram and flowcharting controls. And again, you can see this. These are the minor nuances I missed at first. For example, this chart here, it's a Mac application, so this is running on a Mac. And this, no sim, it's a clear indication this is an iPad. So you can do diagram and flowcharting on an iPad and build it interactively. And these are, as far as I know, these are components. So these tool palette is not something that you have to build yourself. That is actually part of the pack where you have predefined shapes and you can just drag them out and fill them as text, and stuff like persistence is included, so you can create your diagrams and store them and load them, and that is all included in the blocks package.
Fantastic. So yeah, I put the link in for the FNC homepage, and I'll also put a link in here for the page where you can see the different packs that are available. So that you can buy the FNC Component Studio, which I guess includes everything, but then you have the smaller packages as well. Someone just wants to dip their toes into FNC. So
the one remaining question is, what do I need to get if I want to use the core features? That is something that is a question mark for me right now. Like if I just want to use the web browser and the FNC core, core is always included with one of the packages, or is it also possible to get just core?
It's always included. So as soon as you buy, for example, FNC Chart, FNC Cloud Pack, FNC Blocks, whatever, it is always included, just because it is where everything is built on top of it. But if, for example, you have only an interest in the browser is at core level integrated, and the core pack is also available separately. So if, and I believe, I don't remember exactly what the cost is, but I remember that it was very small. So Holger, maybe, or Jim, maybe you can look it up. I don't know anymore.
I just looked it up. It's 75 euros. I'll put a link in here.
And another great thing I wanted to mention, because I think we might have, as this is a hands-on webinar, we might have a few college students or even younger students. FNC is available in the academic license program. So, and if you get the FNC UI Pack, you would also get the FNC Core, and FNC UI is also available as academic license, which means if you are, I think, a college student and you provide proper documentation that you're still enrolled in in a university or school, you will be able to get access to FNC UI, and that includes the FNC Core.
Fantastic.
Also important to note is that I don't think we mentioned that, but that the PDF engine is also part of FNC Core. So if you get that core, you can actually also use it to generate PDFs from everywhere, including in WebCore.
Yeah, and as a student, you're really well covered because you also get the TMS WEB Core as part of the academic licenses, which gives you the web application development and also the reporting that I showed with Excel and everything for VCL and FireMonkey only. FlexCell is not an FNC product, but I just thought I'd mention it. It's also right here.
So the couple of questions here real quick. If somebody goes and buys FNC Core or FNC Maps or one of those component packs and they want to target web, do they need to buy FNC WEB Core as well to target the web from FNC?
TMS WEB Core is a separate product, yes, I think.
Okay.
But Bruno I think that is the case, because TMS WEB Core is the web core, which gives the web development with TMS, right?
TMS WEB Core is the framework for allowing you to create web client applications running in the browser with all the integration that is done in the Delphi IDE to offer that experience for building the apps out of the Delphi IDE. And so that framework is needed, of course, if you want, for example, to use the FNC Core PDF engine to generate PDFs in your web client applications.
Okay, so that makes sense. So the web core and the FNC are two separate packets that work together. So if someone wants to target the web with the maps, for example, they would need both. Or I guess you could just buy just the web.
Yeah, if you do not have web core, of course you can use FNC Core in VCL applications, in FireMonkey applications. So that is out of the box what is in Delphi available. And if you want to go the step to the web, then you need the web core framework.
So if someone wants to get everything, that's all access, or is there something else that would be both web and FNC?
If you really want to get everything, all access is the way to go. And there I want to especially mention, of course, all access is very big. You get, I believe the last count was that you get 65 different products. So it's quite big. That means that, well, its price level is, of course, because of that big size, a little bit steep, I think. But what I wanted to mention is that once you stepped into the all access formula, the yearly renewal is only 495 euros. So once you're in, it's just the yearly subscriptions to keep up with the latest updates of everything, but also get any new product that gets added to the all access family. So anything we do, you get it in that all access formula, and once you are in, it's 495 per year. That's all.
Fantastic. Okay. I think, let's see. I think we got through the questions. Thank you, everybody, for being on here. This was a much longer than usual webinar. We were just trying this out. And based on the hands being raised, it looked like most everybody enjoyed it as well. So this is great. Kind of the idea is we just want to, see where you're at and what it is you're interested in, then we can discuss that. And that seemed to work out. I honestly, right before we started today, I was telling these guys, I was like, well, if we don't have 2 hours worth of stuff to talk about, we don't have to keep going. But as it turns out, we could have probably gone further than 2 hours. So appreciate everybody's patience, appreciate everybody being part of this. And thank you, Peter, for the fantastic work on FNC. I am really impressed with it. I think it's a great set of components, a great set of technologies. Thanks, Bruno, for all the great work you do with TMS software. It's one of the usually when someone asks me about something, it's usually like, well, let's see if TMS has a solution for that, because they probably do. And thanks, Holger, for your presentation and for your books and for everything else. So thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you also, Jim, for hosting this. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.